One more point that's worth mentioning in this, step 2 in our 6-step plan is you want to master marketing, because you have to have a way to replace the PPO plan as the source of new patients in your practice. But secondly, and maybe as important, is you have to have a way to not only replace the patients you lose, but replace the historic flow of patients that have come to you because you've been a participating provider. For example, if you get 20 new patients a month from Delta, I'm just making up an example, the day you resign from Delta, you'll be delisted. Delta will take you off of their website as a participating provider. Even if they have a 90-day notice period, the day you resign, they take you off of their listing. But for if it was 90 days, the next 90 days, you have to remain in contract for your existing patients. But if you get 20 new patients a month from Delta, if we annualize that for just a minute, well, 20 times 12 would be 240 new patients. And if you don't have a way to replace that flow that has come to your practice historically, then you're going to feel the consequences of that. However, when you master marketing ahead of time, proactively, you want to deal with this proactively. You want to be ahead of time on this. When you deal with it proactively, then you already have found a source to replace any you might lose, but you've also replaced the historic flow of patients that have come to you from that plan. Mary, does that make sense?
Absolutely, Gary. I think, the reason, practice owners are giving up 45 to 50% is they don't have new patients finding them outside of these PPO plans. So it's almost like, they have no other choice. So the minute they start creating that choice where they're replacing those patients coming from PPO plans from Google, then they can drop these plans with more and more confidence, because, they don't have to depend on these PPO plans anymore. Anytime you're in a dependency relationship, you feel like you don't have any control.
That's why we see, when we ask, what percent of your patients are PPO patients, we typically see a very, very high percentage. We see 80%, 85%, high percent. That's not unusual. If you're in that boat and you think, well, I'm just in a very unusual situation, that's not unusual at all. That's what we see almost every time. Rarely, when we do the data and we find out what percent of your patients are PPO, if you've been a PPO provider for any amount of time, that number is always overwhelming. Rarely do we see 30%, 35%, 40%. And if you think about it for a minute, it makes perfect sense. Where are you getting your patients from? You're getting your patients from being listed on those plans. That's where you're getting them from. Right. So you've got to replace that and replace it. And the best way to replace that is digital marketing and organic search engine optimization, getting on page 1 of Google when someone in your community is looking for a dentist. And think about this just emotionally for just a minute and rationally. Where would you rather get a patient from? Delta with a corresponding 45% cost, or Google? Where would you rather get the new patient from? Well, that's an easy one for me. Oh, that would be Google, right? Yes. So another mindset shift you might want to make is, from this moment forward, think of those adjustments, the difference between your usual fee and your contracted fee. Think of that as a marketing expense, because you're actually paying Delta to provide you patients. Now, right. Unfortunately, it'll never show up as a marketing expense on your profit and loss statement. It's even more insidious than this. Delta takes it out in advance. So your accountant won't list that as an expense, and it's not technically in the accounting protocols, but it's an expense all the same because you're paying it. Darren, you've been kind enough to offer a marketing strategy meeting to any of our Less Insurance Dependents podcast listeners. I would strongly recommend that any of our listeners schedule that and learn how you could not only radically reduce what you're spending on marketing, but you'll start to attract patients that are choosing you for reasons other than you're on their insurance plan, which you can all imagine. As that domino falls, imagine all the great benefits that come as a result of that, for people choosing you for other reasons than, well, they're on my plan. For other reasons than they wanted it for free. That's another way to look at it.
Absolutely. And the link is ekwa.com/MSM. ekwa.com, equa.com/MSM marketing strategy meeting. like Gary said, we would spend 6 hours researching your marketing to figure out where you stand. And then, of course, give you a plan so you can dominate marketing, especially SEO, Google marketing. So that way you don't have to depend on PPO plans.
Yeah, highly recommend doing that. You've been very kind to offer that at no expense. And I've seen the results not only at LifeSmiles, but from our clients. And just the amazing results of no longer having to be dependent on those PPO plans. Well, as we wrap up this episode, some thanks are in order, Naren. Thanks for co-hosting this podcast. Thanks to all of our listeners. And also thanks for all that you and your team do, Naren and Equa, to help dentists master the world of digital marketing in 2023 and beyond. Also want to thank our listeners. We appreciate each and every one of you. If you haven't done it already, be sure to go to iTunes and write a review for the Less Insurance Dependence podcast. A review on iTunes functions the very same way that, say, a Google review would work for your practice. And remember, you can get the replay for our RITA Summit by going to RIDA replay.com. Take advantage of that 5 hours of content that will help you master this journey to reduce your insurance dependence. On that note, thank you for the privilege of your time. Naren and I look forward to connecting with you on the next Less Insurance Dependence podcast.